The sun had barely risen over Nellis Air Force Base, casting long, cold shadows across the tarmac. Jets gleamed in the early morning light, their sleek frames whispering promises of speed, power, and freedom. She walked past them, her uniform crisp, her boots clicking against the concrete, but inside, a storm raged. Today was another evaluation day, another test in a string of hurdles that seemed endless. Her peers moved with confident strides, heads high, some exchanging jokes, others reviewing flight manuals with quiet determination. She tried to focus, but every glance around reminded her of her precarious position. She had been assigned to row 9, a slot no one desired, a row often overlooked during evaluations. It wasn't the end of the line, but in a program that celebrated precision, skill, and instinct, it might as well have been. Her instructors barely acknowledged her presence in previous simulations, and whispers circulated among her peers, questioning her abilities. "She's fine, but not exceptional. I don't know if she has the instincts." Comments like these stung more than any physical pain she had ever endured. Every day she trained harder, studied longer, and pushed herself further, yet recognition remained elusive. As she entered the hangar, the noise of machinery and chatter surrounded her. The air smelled of fuel, oil, and cold metal, tinged with the faint warmth of engines cooling after pre-dawn tests. Pilots and trainees filled every corner, some stretching their arms, others peering into cockpit dashboards. She moved toward row 9 with quiet determination, adjusting the straps on her flight suit, checking the badges that reflected her identity. Every mark, every patch told a story of commitment, of nights spent memorizing systems, of sweat poured into simulators. But row 9 seemed like a place where those efforts went unnoticed. She found her assigned workstation, a narrow space between two other pilots, each absorbed in their own preparations. She noticed the glances, subtle and not so subtle, some dismissive, others curious. In her mind, she rehearsed maneuvers she had perfected in the simulator, rapid evasive rolls, split-second target calculations, emergency recovery procedures. Her hands shook slightly, not from fear, but anticipation. Today, she told herself, she would show them. Row 9 might have been considered the last, the least likely, but she had no intention of letting labels define her. Her mind wandered briefly to the journey that had led her here. She remembered childhood dreams of flight, staring at jets as a young girl in the Midwest, imagining the roar of engines above her backyard. She remembered the hours spent building model aircraft, learning the science of aerodynamics, reading every book on aviation she could find. When she had finally been accepted into the Air Force, it felt like destiny realized. And yet, the reality was harsher than she expected. Rejection, skepticism, and the constant need to prove herself had become routine companions. Row 9 symbolized that struggle more than any obstacle she had faced before. The instructors arrived, their presence commanding attention. Each had decades of experience, eyes sharp enough to detect hesitation, doubt, or error in a split second. She straightened her posture, attempting to radiate confidence, though inside her stomach churned. One by one, they walked the rows, scrutinizing each trainee, jotting notes, exchanging comments in hushed tones. When they reached her, a small nod was all she received, neutral, devoid of encouragement, almost dismissive. It was not hostile, but it carried the unmistakable weight of indifference. Her stomach sank, but she refused to show it. Around her, the other pilots adjusted helmets, tested communication systems, and ran through pre-flight protocols. The air seemed charged, a mixture of excitement, anxiety, and adrenaline. She ran through mental checklists, noting instrument calibrations, control sensitivities, and tactical maneuvers. Her mind raced faster than her pulse, a torrent of calculations and strategies that she had spent months perfecting. She felt the familiar thrill that came with preparing for flight, the intoxicating mix of anticipation and readiness, but it was tinged with frustration. Being overlooked, being assigned to row 9, felt like a personal affront to her abilities. Minutes stretched into hours. Evaluation exercises began, and pilots were called forward to demonstrate skill under pressure. High-speed simulations, precision maneuvers, emergency response tests, each designed to separate the exceptional from the adequate. She watched her peers perform, some flawlessly, others faltering under scrutiny. The instructors took notes, occasionally exchanging comments that were just loud enough to be overheard. She felt the sting of comparison, each flawless maneuver of another pilot, a reminder of the invisible wall she had yet to break. Row 9 felt heavier with each passing moment. When her turn finally came, she approached the simulator with steady hands, though her heart pounded in her chest. The controls felt familiar, almost like extensions of her own body, yet the weight of expectation and judgment pressed down. The simulator lit up, engines roaring in virtual reality, enemy aircraft materializing in the sky, demanding split-second decisions. She moved through each challenge with precision, executing maneuvers that were technically perfect, strategically brilliant. She anticipated enemy patterns, countered with ingenuity, and completed every exercise flawlessly, or so she thought. But the moment she emerged, the instructor's expressions were measured. Not a single word of praise. Instead, neutral evaluations, minor critiques, subtle gestures indicating room for improvement. Good technique, but lacking instinct, one remarked. Execution solid, but situational awareness could improve, another added. She felt the sting, the dismissal, the quiet doubt embedded in their words. Row 9 had delivered its message loud and clear. In their eyes, she had yet to prove she belonged. Frustration surged, and for the first time in months, doubt flickered in her mind. Walking back to her workstation, she felt a mix of exhaustion and simmering anger. The other pilots chatted, sharing tips, laughing, celebrating minor victories. She slipped back into row 9, adjusting her gear, hiding the ache in her chest. Alone for a moment, she let herself reflect not on failure, but on determination. This rejection would not define her. If anything, it fueled a deeper resolve. The sky had not rejected her. Only human judgment had, and she was determined to rise above it, to prove that skill, instinct, and courage could not be measured by arbitrary rows. By mid-afternoon, the evaluations concluded. Pilots filed out of the hangar, some jubilant, others contemplative. She remained, reviewing notes, recalculating maneuvers, analyzing every detail. Row 9 was no longer a seat, it was a crucible. Each slight, each subtle dismissal became fuel for a fire that would not be quenched. She knew the road ahead was long, the recognition she sought hard-won, but she also knew that no single moment, no single dismissal could erase her potential. Row 9 was only a beginning, and beginnings, she realized, were where legends were born. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the hangar in shades of gold and shadow, she stood outside, looking up at the sky. Jets streaked overhead, leaving trails of vapor, like markers of ambition and achievement. She clenched her fists, feeling the resolve solidify in her chest. Rejection had tried to define her, but she refused. Row 9 could cast doubt, but it could not cage her. The air hummed with possibility, and she swore silently. The world would learn her name, and when it did, it would speak it with respect. The hangar had emptied, leaving only the hum of fluorescent lights and the faint scent of jet fuel lingering in the air. Outside, the sky had darkened to a deep indigo, stars beginning to pierce the evening veil. She remained inside, seated before a simulator, her eyes scanning every instrument, every display. Hours had passed unnoticed. While others sought rest, she existed in a world of calculations, maneuvers, and tactical improvisation. Row 9 had rejected her. The instructors had dismissed her, but she refused to accept that as final judgment. If the Air Force wouldn't recognize her potential, she would create her own. Her fingers danced across the controls, executing maneuvers she had memorized in exhaustive detail. Every roll, dive, and barrel maneuver was practiced until muscle memory transformed precision into instinct. She envisioned enemy jets in her path, anti-aircraft fire blazing toward her position, and she moved with surgical skill, anticipating every threat before it materialized. In her mind, she flew missions that hadn't yet been assigned, scenarios the instructors had never imagined. Every success, every perfectly timed evasive maneuver was a silent rebellion against the doubt Row 9 had imposed. She paused briefly to review her notes, pages filled with meticulous observations. Her handwriting was almost obsessive diagrams of maneuvers, notes on throttle control, timing, escape trajectories, and attack patterns. Her mind cataloged the behavior of enemy aircraft, the responses of defensive systems, and the tiniest environmental factors that could influence a mission's outcome. Her obsession was unmatched, bordering on fanaticism in the eyes of her instructors. Yet she understood something they did not. Preparation was power. She was building not only skill, but an edge no one else could predict. As the hours stretched on, fatigue crept in, but she resisted it. She drank only a small sip of water, her focus unbroken. She knew that mastery required sacrifice. The simulator became her battleground, every mission a proving ground. Enemy formations appeared on her screens, unpredictable, challenging, relentless. Each was met with precision, each maneuver executed flawlessly, as though she were conducting a symphony in the sky. She felt the thrill of success and the sharp sting of challenge, a combination that fueled her obsession further. Row 9 might have doubted her instincts, but here, in the quiet darkness, she proved them wrong again and again. She reflected on the instructor's critiques from the previous day. Good technique, but lacking instinct. Execution solid, but situational awareness could improve. Each comment replayed in her mind, but instead of discouraging her, they became fuel. She analyzed every word, every nuance, dissecting the meaning, searching for a way to transform critique into mastery. She ran scenarios repeatedly, identifying where instinct might fail, where hesitation could cost lives, and how she could anticipate even the most unpredictable events. Row 9's judgment had ignited her determination, and her resolve had hardened into a quiet, unyielding fire. Outside, the base was silent, except for the occasional roar of a departing jet. She could hear the distant clatter of tools from the maintenance crews, the faint echo of voices carried on the wind, yet she remained entirely focused. The world outside was irrelevant. Only the cockpit mattered. She visualized herself in a real mission, enemies closing in, missiles arcing toward her, and she calculated every movement, every counterattack. She was creating a mental map, so complete that when the real moment arrived, she would not hesitate. Row 9 had been a label. They might still underestimate her, but she knew that when opportunity came, she would be ready. Her thoughts drifted to the people who had believed in her, few though they were. A retired flight instructor had once told her, "Talent is invisible until it's needed." That phrase became her mantra. She studied every movement, every instrument, every sound. Her obsession was total. Throttle control, radar interpretation, maneuver anticipation, missile evasion, communication protocols, all cataloged with painstaking precision. She ran simulations not once, not twice, but dozens of times, until instinct and intellect fused into seamless action. She imagined herself soaring past doubters, leaving Row 9's rejection behind like vapor trails in the sky. Hours bled into the early morning. Her eyes burned, her muscles ached, Yet she continued. She created scenarios more complex than any real mission might demand: multiple enemy aircraft, simultaneous threats from air and ground, rapidly changing conditions. Each simulation tested her limits, forced her to improvise, demanded absolute focus. Failure was unacceptable. Every miscalculation became a lesson. Every success reinforced her confidence. She understood something the instructors did not. Instinct was not innate. It was trained, honed, and perfected through repetition. Row 9 had doubted her instincts, but she was cultivating instincts sharper than any pilot they had ever trained. She paused briefly, closing her eyes, imagining the sky outside, the roar of the engines, the wind against the canopy. In her mind, she executed maneuvers with perfection, anticipated enemy strategies before they even happened, and visualized every split-second decision she would make in the heat of battle. It was exhilarating, terrifying, and intoxicating all at once. Row 9 might have been her station in the hangar, but it was no longer a prison. It was a foundation. Every rejection, every critique, every overlooked skill was now building toward the moment she would rise. By mid-morning, exhaustion finally tugged at her, a subtle reminder that she was human. She stood, stretched, and moved toward the window of the hangar. Sunlight streamed in, illuminating the tarmac and the rows of jets gleaming like silver predators waiting for a hunt. She watched pilots preparing for morning exercises, the excitement in their movements, the confidence in their strides. For a brief moment, envy flickered, but it was quickly replaced by determination. One day, she would be out there, not watching, but leading, not following, but defining. Row 9 had underestimated her, but the sky never would. She returned to her workstation and reviewed her logs one last time. Diagrams of maneuvers, checklists, notes on enemy formations, and tactical improvisations filled every page. Her obsession had produced not only knowledge, but mastery. She felt a sense of calm satisfaction, tempered by the awareness that preparation was never truly complete. There would always be one more maneuver, one more scenario, one more challenge to anticipate. Row 9 might have dismissed her talent today, but tomorrow, when opportunity arrived, she would be ready. Her mind was a weapon, her skill a force, and she would not be ignored. The day ended as quietly as it had begun. She powered down the simulator, carefully organized her notes, and walked toward the hangar exit. The air outside was crisp, carrying the faint tang of fuel and ozone. She looked up at the sky, imagining the flight that awaited her in the future, the maneuvers, the evasions, the triumphs. Row 9 would not define her. Not then, not ever. The rejection, the doubt, the whispered criticisms, they were fuel, not chains. She knew her time would come, and when it did, the world would see what Row 9 could not. As she left the hangar, her eyes caught the glint of an F-22 in the morning light. The sleek lines, the sheer power of the aircraft seemed to beckon her. She clenched her fists, a promise forming in her mind. She would not remain overlooked. She would not remain doubted, and she would not be underestimated. The skills she honed tonight, the simulations she had perfected, the instincts she had cultivated, they would all be unleashed when the sky demanded it. Row 9 might have been a starting point, but the world above would be her proving ground. And in that quiet, solitary moment, standing alone on the tarmac with the first rays of sunlight reflecting off the jets, she made a vow to herself. She would not merely fly. She would dominate, she would excel, and she would rise above every doubt, every rejection, and every limitation imposed on her. Row 9 was the beginning, but her story had only just begun. The sky awaited, and she would answer its call. The sun had barely climbed over the horizon when orders came down. A high-priority reconnaissance mission over volatile airspace, a region where enemy activity had increased exponentially over the past weeks. The base was abuzz with activity, Pilots scrambling to gear up, engines warming, communication lines crackling with urgency. She watched from the sidelines, row 9 still her station, assigned to support roles, monitoring feeds, coordinating logistics, and relaying information. She had trained for moments like this, yet her presence in the cockpit was denied. Frustration rose like fire in her chest, but she masked it behind a calm, professional demeanor. From her post in the control tower, she could see the F-22s lined up, engines glowing, ready to take off. Pilots moved with precision and confidence, reviewing instruments, running final checks, their heads held high with the poise of experience. Her heart raced as she observed them, noting every movement, every adjustment, calculating what she would do differently in their place. Every simulation she had run flashed through her mind: maneuvers, attack strategies, evasive techniques. She could anticipate the flight paths and enemy responses before they even lifted off. Row 9 may have sidelined her physically, but mentally, she was already flying the mission. The radio crackled with orders, assigning reconnaissance zones and outlining threat levels. Intelligence reports indicated multiple hostile patrols and advanced anti-air defenses. Every pilot's skill would be tested to the limit, and she sat with a quiet intensity, analyzing every detail. She made mental notes, predicting the enemy's movements, evaluating potential scenarios, considering what she would do if confronted with unexpected threats. Her fingers itched to take control, to climb into the cockpit, to demonstrate that she could handle every challenge thrown her way. Yet she remained in her support role, invisible to most, a ghost in the midst of high-stakes preparation. Hours passed as the planes took off one by one, disappearing into the horizon with the roar of engines and the blur of motion. She tracked them through radar and communication channels, monitoring altitude, speed, and engagement patterns. Every movement was anticipated, every possible error accounted for. She whispered instructions into the comms, not as orders, but as silent advice, hoping that somehow her foresight would guide the pilots. She could see the danger zones forming, the enemy patrols adjusting, and the potential for disaster looming over the mission. She knew that if someone faltered, lives could be lost. Then it happened, the unthinkable. A pilot's communications went silent. Radar readings showed erratic movement, followed by a sudden drop in altitude. Panic rippled through the base. Alarms blared, red lights flashed, and chaos erupted as the remaining pilots scrambled to compensate. She leaned over the console, scanning every screen, her mind moving faster than ever. Calculations, maneuvers, contingency plans, everything she had trained for flooded her consciousness. In that moment, there was no row 9, no sidelining, no oversight. There was only the mission, and her mind became the cockpit she had been denied. The call for assistance came through, fragmented, filled with static and urgency. Over the comms, a voice broke through the voice of the pilot in trouble. Her code name. Her heart leapt, adrenaline coursing through her veins. Recognition, trust, desperation, all rolled into a single haunting sound. She didn't hesitate. In that instant, she knew that the mission, the lives at stake, and her own potential converged. She grabbed her flight suit, helmet in hand, and sprinted toward an available F-22, heart pounding, mind calculating every risk. Today, row 9 would not define her, she would define the mission. Climbing into the cockpit, the world around her narrowed to instruments, displays, and the roar of engines coming alive beneath her. The seat molded to her body, controls responding like extensions of her very muscles. She ran through pre-flight checks with lightning speed, her mind already visualizing the maneuvers that would keep her alive and save the pilot. Every detail mattered: the trajectory of enemy fire, optimal evasive patterns, timing for missile deployment, coordination with supporting units. Every simulation she had run in the past months now manifested in real-time decisions, her instincts honed to perfection. As she ascended into the sky, the ground falling away beneath her, she could see the chaos in the air enemy patrols converging, anti-air defenses locking onto her position. The downed pilot was visible on the HUD, struggling, vulnerable. Her every sense sharpened, every calculation exact. Enemy jets closed in from multiple angles, attempting to cut off escape routes. She executed maneuvers she had practiced 100 times, weaving through threats with precision. Barrel rolls, evasive dives, high-speed climbs, each move a blend of intuition and calculation. Her body and mind moved in perfect synchrony, an instrument of skill, determination, and raw courage. Her voice, steady over the comms, coordinated with other pilots, guiding them to intercept threats and create a path of escape. Despite the chaos, she remained calm, her mind a fortress of logic and instinct. She anticipated every enemy movement, predicting patterns, exploiting weaknesses, and maintaining a clear line of sight to the downed pilot. Every second was life or death. The cockpit was alive with alarms, indicators, and enemy signals. Yet she moved with the grace and focus of a seasoned pilot, proof that preparation, discipline, and instinct could overcome any limitation imposed by doubt. Below her, the landscape stretched out mountains, valleys, rivers, and urban zones, but she was focused only on the mission, the lives depending on her, and the enemy that threatened them. Time seemed both compressed and eternal, every second an eternity, every decision monumental. She adjusted altitude, velocity, and angle, executing maneuvers designed to confuse the enemy and protect the vulnerable pilot. Row 9 was a distant memory, a label that once represented limitation. Now, she was the embodiment of skill, courage, and unyielding resolve. She was no longer a sideline trainee. She was the lifeline in the sky. Minutes felt like hours, yet she pressed on, refusing to yield to fatigue or fear. Her mind calculated continuously, every threat anticipated, every countermeasure executed flawlessly. The downed pilot, battered but alive, was finally within reach. Enemy jets attempted one last intercept, but she anticipated their moves, countered with calculated precision, and cleared a safe path. The mission, which had seemed impossible from the control tower, was now within her control. Row 9, once a place of dismissal, had prepared her for this exact moment, not through recognition, but through perseverance. Finally, with the downed pilot secure and enemy threats neutralized, she began the long return to base. Every movement remained precise, every calculation perfect. Relief washed over her, but only briefly. She remained focused, knowing that mistakes in the final stretch could be fatal. As the F-22 descended toward the runway, she felt the culmination of months of preparation, determination, and hidden mastery. The world outside had doubted her. Row 9 had rejected her. But in that cockpit, she had proven something undeniable. Skill, courage, and preparation always shine when opportunity arrives. Landing the F-22 safely, the engines winding down with a roar, she felt a surge of quiet triumph. She had taken the mission from chaos to success, saved a life, and executed maneuvers few could imagine. The support crew rushed toward the cockpit, awe and astonishment in their eyes. She stepped down, helmet under her arm, heart still pounding, yet calm in her achievement. Row 9's rejection had been a crucible. Her preparation had turned it into a launch pad. Today, she had flown beyond doubt, beyond labels, beyond the limitations others tried to impose. As she walked away from the jet, she glimpsed the commander approaching, a mixture of astonishment and newfound respect in his eyes. No words were needed, her performance had spoken volumes. Row 9, once a symbol of dismissal, had transformed into the proving ground that forged her into a pilot capable of extraordinary feats. In her mind, she replayed every maneuver, every calculated risk, every split-second decision, knowing that this mission would be remembered not for the chaos, but for her skill, bravery, and unyielding determination. The events of that day marked a turning point. Row 9 had tried to define her, limit her, and dismiss her potential, but in the heat of real action, she had redefined herself. The sky had not rejected her. The world had not overlooked her. And in the quiet moments after the mission, she knew that this was only the beginning. The battles ahead, the missions to come, and the recognition she deserved were all within reach. Row 9 was behind her, but the horizon now stretched endlessly forward, full of promise, challenge, and opportunity. The radio crackled, a harsh burst of static cutting through the tense hum of the control tower. Orders, alerts, and updates had been flowing steadily, but this call was different. It was fragmented, urgent, and laced with desperation. Then came the voice she had longed to hear, clear, precise, yet strained with anxiety. Her code name. The words pierced through the comms like a lightning bolt, cutting through hours of frustration, doubt, and sideline duty. In that moment, Row 9, the hangar, and the invisible labels assigned to her vanished. The mission had found her, and she could not hesitate. Without a second thought, she grabbed her flight suit, tightened the straps, and hoisted her helmet into place. Every muscle screamed in anticipation. Months of preparation, countless hours in simulators, endless calculations in her mind. They were all about to converge in reality. The world had kept her on the sidelines long enough, but now necessity demanded her presence in the cockpit. The downed pilot's life depended on her speed, skill, and instinct. There was no room for hesitation, no luxury of doubt. Row 9 had not trained her for recognition. It had trained her for survival, strategy, and action. The F-22 before her gleamed under the hangar lights, engines already humming, as if aware of the urgency. She climbed in with practiced precision, her fingers brushing the controls like a pianist on keys. Every instrument, every display flickered to life. Radar screens pulsed, communication systems buzzed, and engine tones reverberated through her body. She ran through pre-flight checks almost automatically, her mind already racing ahead. Calculations for maneuvering, evasive action, missile deployment, and tactical coordination ran through her consciousness like a perfectly timed symphony. Every instinct she had sharpened in secret was now primed for execution. As she taxied the jet toward the runway, her focus narrowed to a single point, the mission. Outside, the sun glinted off the tarmac, a fleeting reminder of normalcy, of calm, of what had been denied her for so long. But she was no longer the sideline trainee. She was the operative, the solution, the lifeline. Every movement was deliberate, precise, calculated to optimize her launch and intercept trajectory. The world beyond Row 9 no longer mattered. What mattered was the sky, the mission, and the life that depended on her skill. The engines roared to life as she lifted off, the ground falling away beneath her, and the horizon opening into a vast expanse of danger and possibility. Enemy formations had already begun to converge near the downed pilot's location, their movement detected by radar, their strategy predictable to her trained mind. Every calculation she had performed during late-night simulations became real-time strategy. She predicted the enemy's flight paths, identified weak points in their formation, and plotted a path that minimized risk while maximizing protection for the vulnerable pilot. The radio buzzed intermittently with updates from other pilots, their voices a mixture of tension and disbelief at the rapidly unfolding situation. She maintained calm, issuing concise, clear guidance, directing supporting units, and ensuring communication lines remained unbroken. Every decision mattered. One misstep could mean disaster, Yet, within the cockpit, she was a force of focus, precision, and instinct. Row 9 had tried to define her as ordinary, overlooked, unready, but in the crucible of crisis, she was extraordinary. Every maneuver she executed confirmed her readiness. She approached the pilot's last known location, visual cues confirming the position, even as enemy jets closed in from multiple angles. Time seemed to stretch and compress simultaneously, each second a lifetime, every heartbeat a calculation. She executed a series of complex evasive maneuvers, high-speed rolls, dives, sharp turns, all calculated to confuse the enemy while maintaining a clear line of sight to the pilot. The F-22 responded flawlessly, an extension of her own body, every instinct synced perfectly with the aircraft. Row 9's rejection could not touch her now. As she drew nearer, she could see the downed pilot struggling, caught in hostile territory, exposed to multiple threats. Her training kicked into overdrive. She coordinated air support, calculated attack angles, and anticipated enemy maneuvers. She moved like a shadow, precise and unstoppable, a master of both strategy and action. Each enemy attempt to intercept her was countered before it could become a true threat. Every second was measured, deliberate, and executed with perfect timing. The sky, once a distant dream, had become her battlefield. Amid the chaos, her mind remained hyper-focused. She visualized the terrain below, the enemy positions, and the optimal path for extraction. She executed maneuvers she had only practiced in simulations, adjusting in real time for conditions she could not have predicted. Each roll, dive, and evasive twist was not just a physical action, but a calculated strategy. She anticipated threats before they occurred, countering with precision, a perfect synthesis of instinct, knowledge, and preparation. Row 9's dismissal had trained her indirectly, forging an edge that no one else had anticipated. The enemy jets pressed closer, their formations tight and aggressive. Missiles streaked across the sky, narrowly missing their targets, as she threaded the F-22 through a deadly ballet of aerial combat. Every movement had been premeditated, yet she improvised continuously, adapting to the unpredictable flow of battle. She coordinated with other pilots over the comms, guiding them to block enemy paths, clear safe routes, and provide covering fire. Every interaction was calculated, seamless, and decisive. In that moment, she was more than a pilot. She was the mission incarnate, the lifeline between danger and survival. Finally, she reached the downed pilot, positioning herself to provide cover and assess extraction options. Her heart pounded, not with fear, but with focused intensity. The months of hidden preparation, every late night in the simulator, every painstaking calculation converged here. Enemy forces continued their assault, but she moved with grace, efficiency, and absolute confidence. She executed a sequence of maneuvers that provided a protective shield, drawing attention away from the pilot while plotting the path back to safety. Row 9 was irrelevant. The sky and her skill defined her now. As she secured the pilot in the HUD's safe extraction zone, the reality of her accomplishment began to take shape. She had moved from sideline trainee to decisive operator in a high-stakes crisis. Every instinct she had honed, every calculation she had performed in secrecy, had been proven effective under pressure. The radio buzzed with astonished voices, other pilots recognizing her skill, the base realizing that Row 9's dismissal had underestimated a true prodigy. In that moment, she was no longer invisible. She was indispensable. With the downed pilot finally under protection, she initiated the extraction maneuver, carefully navigating back toward friendly airspace. Enemy jets attempted one final interception, but she countered them effortlessly, every move executed with the precision of a master strategist. The F-22 obeyed her commands instinctively, every control input a direct extension of her skill. The chaos of battle swirled around her, yet she remained composed, calculating, and decisive. Row 9 had been a crucible of doubt. Now it had forged an unbreakable resolve. As the horizon expanded and friendly territory came into view, a sense of triumph washed over her. Not arrogance, but quiet, unyielding confidence. She had answered the call, proven her capability, and saved a life under conditions that would have shattered many. The world had questioned her. Row 9 had cast her aside, and yet she had risen beyond their limitations. She felt the exhilaration of mastery, tempered by awareness that the mission was not yet complete. Precision, vigilance, and calm determination remained her constant companions. Landing the F-22 safely, engines winding down with a low, satisfying roar, she remained poised, helmet under her arm. The pilot she had rescued approached, gratitude etched across his features. Other pilots and crew members stared in disbelief, whispers of awe and admiration filling the air. Row 9's past dismissal was irrelevant. Her actions had rewritten the narrative. She had moved from obscurity to essential, from doubt to respect, all in a single high-stakes sequence. The sky had recognized her skill long before anyone on the ground had. That evening, as the sun dipped low, painting the runway with golden streaks, she walked away from the jet. Her heart still raced, yet her mind was calm, reflective. Every maneuver, every calculation, every split-second decision had proven something far greater than mere competence. Row 9 could no longer contain her potential. She had become indispensable, a pilot who had not only survived, but excelled where others might have failed. The sky had called, she had answered, and nothing, not dismissal, not doubt, not labels, could diminish the force she had become. The roar of the F-22 engines filled her ears as she broke through the clouds, the ground shrinking rapidly beneath her. Adrenaline surged, sharpening every sense. Enemy aircraft swarmed near the pilot she had been sent to rescue, moving in aggressive patterns, attempting to intercept any path of extraction. She tightened her grip on the controls, eyes flicking between instruments and HUD displays. Every calculation she had rehearsed in simulators and long nights of preparation now dictated her every move. Row 9, the dismissal, the doubts, they all faded behind her focus. This was the battlefield, and she was fully awake. The sky was a living chessboard of danger, with enemy jets weaving through the air like predators. She anticipated their maneuvers with uncanny accuracy, her months of hidden preparation crystallizing into flawless instinct. Every barrel roll, every dive, every high-speed turn was executed with a combination of precision and improvisation, keeping her aircraft just out of reach of hostile fire while positioning herself to protect the downed pilot. Radar signals, comms chatter, and visual cues all blended into a single, cohesive awareness. The cockpit was an extension of her body. The F-22, a loyal instrument of her skill. She maintained communication with other pilots, coordinating their movements in real time. Left flank, intercept, she ordered crisply over the radio. Cover 6 missiles inbound. Adjust altitude 20 degrees. Each command was precise, immediate, and essential. Her words were not just instructions. They were lifelines, guiding the team and keeping the mission on track. The sky, once a symbol of her dreams and frustrations, had now become her dominion. She was no longer a trainee dismissed to Row 9. She was a force of strategy and execution, trusted implicitly in a life-or-death scenario. Enemy jets attempted to flank her, closing from multiple angles, yet she anticipated every approach. She executed a sharp vertical climb, rolling the aircraft to the side at the perfect moment, causing pursuing missiles to overshoot. Every split-second decision was critical. Her body moved with reflexive precision, honed from countless simulations. The tension in the cockpit was palpable, yet her mind was calm, focused, and ruthless in its efficiency. Row 9 had underestimated her instinct, but here, high above the ground, she demonstrated mastery no one could contest. Below, the terrain was treacherous. Mountains, valleys, and rivers created natural obstacles. Enemy anti-aircraft positions lined the landscape, threatening the pilot she aimed to rescue. She adjusted her altitude with surgical precision, balancing speed, visibility, and threat avoidance. The downed pilot's position appeared on the HUD, vulnerable and exposed. She calculated every maneuver to shield him from incoming threats while preparing for extraction. Time slowed in her perception. Each second carried monumental weight. Every instinct, every calculation, and every ounce of skill she had trained in secrecy coalesced in that single mission. A sudden burst of missiles streaked toward the downed pilot. She banked sharply, diving between the threats and creating a protective corridor. Enemy jets attempted to intercept her, but she was always one step ahead. She anticipated their angles, predicted evasive patterns, and countered with precision, forcing them into vulnerable positions. She executed a series of rapid maneuvers, barrel rolls, steep climbs, and dives that few pilots could replicate. The cockpit was alive with the hum of engines, alarms, and her own heightened senses. She was alive, not just surviving, but dominating the battlefield. The downed pilot looked up, eyes wide with fear and relief. She could see him struggling to maintain cover, exposed to multiple threats. Her training took over, instincts guiding her path. She positioned herself between him and the enemy, drawing fire while maintaining an escape route. Every roll, dive, and barrel maneuver created a protective envelope around him. Her mind worked in continuous calculation, trajectory, speed, enemy location, missile paths, and potential contingencies. Row 9 had attempted to limit her, but now her preparation and skill rendered limits meaningless. Enemy jets launched another attack, attempting to cut off their extraction path. She executed a rapid climbing twist, firing countermeasures and forcing them into predictable arcs. Each movement was precise, deliberate, and perfectly timed. Her coordination with supporting pilots was seamless. They responded to her commands instantly, forming a protective perimeter. She adjusted altitude, speed, and angle continuously, maintaining control of every variable in a chaotic sky. Her instincts, refined through months of secret preparation, allowed her to anticipate threats before they materialized, keeping both herself and the pilot alive. As she approached the extraction zone, she calculated the optimal path through enemy lines. Radar signals, terrain mapping, and visual analysis all merged into one mental map. She executed maneuvers that had only existed in simulations before, weaving through enemy patrols, diving to avoid detection, and using natural cover from the terrain below. Each movement demanded perfection. The cockpit became an arena of skill, courage, and rapid calculation. Row 9 had tried to define her as ordinary, but here she was extraordinary, a pilot whose preparation and instinct had forged her into an unmatched operative. The extraction maneuver required the perfect combination of speed, timing, and protective positioning. She initiated the sequence, banking sharply to avoid ground-based anti-aircraft fire, while creating a clear path for the downed pilot. Enemy aircraft scrambled, attempting to intercept, but her anticipatory maneuvers forced them into disadvantageous positions. She deployed flares and countermeasures strategically, using every tool at her disposal. Her mind, body, and aircraft moved in perfect harmony, a symphony of precision and instinct. Row 9's rejection now seemed irrelevant. Her performance validated every hour of preparation, every moment of quiet obsession. Finally, the downed pilot was within safe range, secured under her protective envelope. She guided him toward friendly airspace, every maneuver executed with relentless focus. Enemy jets attempted one final interception, but she anticipated and countered each threat with flawless execution. The exhilaration of victory mingled with relief, yet she remained fully focused. There was no room for error until they were completely clear. Every calculation, every instinct, every movement had been tested and proven in the most extreme conditions imaginable. She was not just surviving, she was orchestrating success. The landscape below shifted from hostile territory to familiar, safe zones. She maintained altitude, speed, and formation, ensuring the downed pilot remained protected. Communication with supporting pilots continued, coordinating positions and maintaining security. The mission, which had seemed impossible from the ground, was now under her command. Row 9, once a symbol of dismissal, had forged her into the pilot capable of extraordinary precision and instinct. Every second of training, every hour of preparation, had culminated in this flawless execution of skill. As they approached friendly airspace, she executed the final maneuvers, clearing enemy threats and ensuring the pilot's safe return. Her heart pounded with a mixture of relief, triumph, and lingering tension. The cockpit, once a confining space of duty, had transformed into an arena of mastery, where every instinct, every calculation, and every trained skill had been unleashed. She had not only survived, but excelled, turning potential disaster into controlled success. Row 9 had underestimated her, but she had proven her worth beyond any doubt. Touching down on the runway, engines winding down with a deep, satisfying roar, she felt the culmination of months of effort, secret preparation, and quiet determination. The pilot she had rescued expressed gratitude that went beyond words. His life had depended on her skill, courage, and instincts. Crew members and fellow pilots stared, astonished and impressed by the precision and calm she had demonstrated under extreme pressure. Row 9, once a symbol of limitation, was now the birthplace of a pilot whose talent could not be ignored. Even as the mission concluded, she remained composed, analyzing every movement, every decision, and every maneuver. The exhilaration of success mingled with reflection on the months of preparation that had enabled her to rise above doubt. The sky, once a distant dream, had become a proving ground where instinct, skill, and courage converged into a singular force. Row 9 had not trained her for recognition, but it had inadvertently created a pilot capable of extraordinary action when opportunity demanded. Walking away from the F-22, helmet under her arm, she felt the satisfaction of mastery, tempered by awareness of the challenges ahead. She had answered the call, transformed doubt into triumph, and proven her worth in a scenario that would test any pilot to their limits. Row 9's rejection was now a distant memory. The sky had witnessed her skill, courage, and decisive action. She had not only flown, she had dominated. And in that domination lay the promise of a future defined by talent, preparation, and unwavering resolve. The terrain below was a treacherous mosaic of mountains, canyons, and rivers, a hostile playground for any pilot, unprepared for split-second decision-making. Enemy forces swarmed in unpredictable patterns, attempting to block any extraction path for the downed pilot. Yet she remained calm, eyes scanning the HUD, hands poised on the controls, mind calculating dozens of variables in real time. Every maneuver, every adjustment, every second of reaction time was critical. One miscalculation could be fatal, not just for her, but for the pilot she had sworn to protect. She had trained for this moment, and now it demanded perfection. Her fingers danced across the flight controls with a practiced precision, executing maneuvers she had only mastered in simulations. Barrel rolls, steep dives, sudden vertical climbs, each movement, a calculated response to threats from enemy aircraft and anti-air defenses on the ground. She guided the F-22 with instinctual finesse, predicting enemy actions before they occurred and countering them with precision. Missiles streaked past, narrowly missing her aircraft, but she remained composed, focusing on the ultimate objective, safe extraction. Row 9 had doubted her instincts, but here, high above hostile territory, her instincts were flawless. The downed pilot was within sight, but vulnerable. Enemy aircraft began to converge, forming a tight formation designed to cut off any approach. She assessed their speed, trajectories, and weapon systems in milliseconds, plotting a path that would allow her to intervene without compromising her safety. With surgical precision, she executed a sharp vertical climb, followed by a twisting dive, drawing enemy fire away from the pilot. The sky became a battlefield of calculation and instinct, each movement choreographed, yet adaptive, a dance of survival and skill. Every action she had rehearsed countless times now became life-saving reality. Communications buzzed with updates from supporting pilots, coordinating cover, and clearing paths for extraction. Her voice was calm, authoritative, and decisive. Left flank intercept. Altitude 20 cover the pilot 6. Missile inbound. Deploy countermeasures. Every word was critical. Every command a lifeline. She guided her team seamlessly, orchestrating a coordinated effort in a chaotic sky. Even as enemy formations attempted to flank, her strategy kept the pilot safe, creating a protective bubble around him. Row 9, the rejection, the whispers of doubt, they were irrelevant. She was no longer a sideline trainee. She was the pivot upon which the mission turned. A sudden alert flashed on her radar, a group of enemy jets attempting an aggressive interception. She adjusted speed, rolled sharply, and executed a high-speed climb, evading their approach while maintaining a line of sight on the pilot. Her body moved with instinctive precision, trained over countless late nights and simulations. Every movement was calculated, yet fluid, allowing her to adapt to the unpredictable battlefield. The enemy's attempts to predict her maneuvers failed. She remained always one step ahead, a master of strategy and aerial combat. Row 9's doubt had fueled her resolve, and now she was unstoppable. The downed pilot, seeing her protective maneuvers, adjusted his own position, following her guidance. She noted every movement, every shift, ensuring he remained shielded from incoming threats. The air was thick with tension. Every second mattered. She calculated escape angles, altitudes, and trajectories, ensuring that the pilot could reach safety while enemy forces were diverted. Each maneuver she executed forced the opposition into disadvantageous positions, allowing her team to coordinate counterattacks. The balance of life and death rested on her skill, focus, and determination. Row 9 had tried to confine her. The sky now showcased her mastery. As she maneuvered closer to the pilot, a series of anti-aircraft launches erupted from the ground. She calculated their trajectories instantly, executing evasive rolls and steep dives to avoid impact while simultaneously shielding the pilot. Every movement was deliberate, executed with a level of precision few pilots could match. She countered threats from multiple vectors, using both terrain and velocity to her advantage. Enemy jets attempted to intercept again, but her anticipation and calculation allowed her to evade and redirect them. Row 9 had underestimated her ability to adapt under pressure. The sky now proved her extraordinary skill. With a final series of maneuvers, she cleared a path for the pilot to move toward a safer extraction zone. The enemy formation had been disrupted, their attacks neutralized or rendered ineffective by her tactical brilliance. She guided the pilot, voice calm but commanding. Move toward the ridge. I've cleared your path, hold steady and follow my lead. Every second was orchestrated, every movement precise, ensuring the pilot remained protected while enemy forces recalculated their positions. The mission had transformed from impossible to achievable, and her skill had been the fulcrum of success. Moments later, the downed pilot reached a safer location, shielded from both aerial and ground threats. She provided covering maneuvers, maintaining altitude and speed to intercept any remaining enemy attempts. Her body and mind functioned as one, executing actions instinctively, yet with deliberate calculation. Missiles were dodged, jets flanked, and anti-aircraft systems neutralized with expert precision. The extraction zone was finally secured, the pilot safe under her watchful guidance. Row 9's dismissal now seemed laughable. She had proven beyond any doubt that instinct, preparation, and courage could overcome skepticism. As she guided the pilot toward friendly airspace, the adrenaline of the mission remained, but her focus never wavered. Every maneuver, every adjustment, every calculation continued until they were well clear of enemy territory. The supporting pilots coordinated seamlessly under her direction, forming a protective envelope around both her and the rescued pilot. She executed each movement with precision, ensuring no vulnerabilities remained. The mission, which had begun as a test of skill and patience from the sidelines, had now transformed into a display of mastery and courage that few could rival. Finally, as they entered safe airspace, she slowed the F-22, maintaining vigilance until every threat was neutralized. The tension eased slightly, replaced by relief and satisfaction. The downed pilot, once vulnerable and exposed, now looked at her with a mixture of awe and gratitude. She had not only rescued him, but had done so with an elegance and precision that elevated her above every doubt cast by Row 9, by instructors or by peers. Her skill was undeniable, her instinct proven, and her courage visible in every maneuver. Landing the F-22 on friendly territory, engines winding down with a powerful roar, she stepped out, helmet under her arm. The pilot she rescued approached, gratitude evident in his expression, while other pilots and crew members stared in astonishment. Row 9, once a symbol of rejection, had given birth to a pilot whose preparation, skill, and courage were unmatched. She had taken an impossible mission and transformed it into a testament of determination, instinct, and mastery. The turning point was complete. In the aftermath, as debriefing began, she reflected on the mission's critical moments. Every evasive roll, every barrel maneuver, every calculated adjustment had been executed flawlessly, and every action had been honed through hours of hidden preparation. Row 9 had underestimated her, but in the chaos of real-life danger, she had risen above expectation. The turning point was not just in the success of the mission, it was in the realization that her skill and instinct were formidable, undeniable, and respected. That night, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the base in gold and shadow, she stood alone on the tarmac, looking at the F-22 she had piloted into and out of chaos. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of jet fuel and ozone. She allowed herself a brief moment of reflection and pride. Row 9 had tried to confine her, to limit her, and to dismiss her talent. But now she had proven that preparation, skill, and courage could overcome any obstacle. The turning point had been reached, and the sky was hers to command. The hum of the base had shifted. Where hours earlier there had been chaos and doubt, now there was awe. Crew members whispered among themselves. Pilots exchanged glances of disbelief, and even instructors who had dismissed her weeks ago watched in silent astonishment. She stepped away from the F-22, her flight suit still warm from the hours of action, her helmet tucked under her arm. The adrenaline that had fueled her precision and instinct gradually ebbed, leaving a quiet satisfaction. Row 9's doubt had been replaced with undeniable evidence of her skill. The rescued pilot approached, gratitude shining in his eyes. "I wouldn't have made it without you," he said, his voice steady but filled with relief. "You saved my life, and you did it flawlessly." Her lips curved in a small, almost shy smile. She had expected recognition to be loud, public, a proclamation. But here it was quiet, sincere, earned through action rather than words. Every maneuver, every calculated risk, every split-second decision had culminated in this moment. Row 9 had doubted her, but the sky had already acknowledged her mastery. Instructors began to gather, their expressions a mix of surprise, pride, and grudging respect. They had watched her every movement, calculated every maneuver, and realized the depth of skill that had been overlooked. One senior officer, whose words had once stung with dismissal, stepped forward. "I underestimated you," he admitted, his voice steady but carrying weight. "Your performance today was extraordinary. We've all been watching, and I see now what Row 9 couldn't or wouldn't recognize." Her heart swelled, a mixture of vindication and humility. The recognition she had longed for was finally here, earned in the crucible of real danger. Other pilots, once peers who had never truly noticed her, began to approach, their faces a mixture of awe and curiosity. Questions were asked, congratulations offered, and admiration expressed. She had gone from invisible to essential, from sideline trainee to the pivot upon which a critical mission had turned. Each acknowledgement reinforced what she already knew. Preparation, skill, and instinct were invaluable, but they needed the moment of opportunity to shine. Row 9 had been a crucible, but she had forged herself into something the world could no longer ignore. The debriefing began in earnest. Every detail of the mission was dissected: the maneuvers, the coordination, the rapid adaptation to unpredictable threats. Instructors asked questions, sometimes challenging, sometimes incredulous. She answered each with clarity and confidence, describing her calculations, anticipatory strategies, and split-second adjustments. Her explanation revealed the depth of preparation behind every movement, the countless hours in simulators, and the careful study of enemy patterns. Row 9's rejection now seemed almost absurd, a minor obstacle in the shadow of undeniable talent. As the debriefing continued, it became clear that her performance had not only saved a life, but had also provided critical intelligence and strategic advantage. Enemy positions had been disrupted, formations broken, and potential threats neutralized, all due to her anticipation and execution. Instructors, who had once dismissed her, now acknowledged that she had redefined expectations for trainees and pilots alike. Her meticulous preparation, once invisible, had been transformed into tangible results that could not be ignored. Row 9 had underestimated her, but the evidence was now irrefutable. Outside the debriefing room, word of her actions spread quickly across the base. Crew members, pilots, and support staff discussed her courage and precision, the daring maneuvers that had saved a life and disrupted enemy operations. She walked through the halls, a quiet presence amidst a sea of newfound respect. Eyes followed her, murmurs of admiration filled the air, and for the first time, she realized the weight of her accomplishment, not just for herself, but for those who had witnessed it and would carry the memory forward. Row 9's doubt had been replaced by universal acknowledgement. A senior officer approached, handing her a folder containing commendations and mission reports. "You've set a new standard today," he said, "not just for skill, but for leadership, instinct, and courage under pressure. Your actions will be studied, analyzed, and used to train future pilots. Row 9 may have overlooked your potential, but we won't make that mistake again." She nodded, accepting the recognition without fanfare. The validation was real, tangible, and earned through action rather than expectation. She had turned rejection into triumph, doubt into undeniable proof of her mastery. The rescued pilot joined her, looking at the F-22 with a mixture of reverence and relief. "I owe you everything," he said, "and everyone else will know your name now." She allowed herself a small smile. The mission had been a turning point, not just in her career, but in the way she was perceived. Row 9's dismissal, once a source of frustration, had become the catalyst that drove her to preparation, instinct, and unmatched precision. The recognition she now received was proof that skill and courage, once proven, could no longer be ignored. As evening fell over the base, painting the tarmac in gold and shadow, she stood alone for a moment, reflecting on the journey. Months of rejection, hours of secret preparation, and endless practice had culminated in this undeniable victory. Row 9 had tried to define her limits, but she had shattered them in the crucible of real danger. The sky had acknowledged her skill before anyone else did, but the acknowledgement from peers, instructors, and the rescued pilot now solidified her position. She was no longer sidelined. She was recognized, respected, and proven. The lessons of Row 9 lingered, not as regret but as motivation. The rejection had fueled her determination, driving her to perfect her skills, anticipate threats, and prepare for the moment when opportunity arrived. That moment had come, and she had risen to meet it. Recognition, respect, and acknowledgement were now hers, earned through mastery rather than expectation. Row 9 had tried to limit her, but she had rewritten the narrative one maneuver, one life saved, one mission flawlessly executed at a time. By nightfall, the base quieted, and the adrenaline of the mission subsided. Yet in her mind, every maneuver, every split-second decision, every calculated risk played back like a vivid simulation. She had proven her skill to the sky, to the pilot she saved, and to the instructors who had once doubted her. Recognition, long denied, was now undeniable. Row 9 was no longer a symbol of limitation. It had been the forge that strengthened her, shaping a pilot capable of precision, instinct, and courage under fire. As she walked toward the hangar, the glow of lights reflecting off the F-22s, she felt a deep sense of accomplishment. The world had acknowledged her talent, and the sky had validated her preparation. She had transformed doubt into proof, rejection into triumph, and potential into undeniable reality. Row 9 had been the beginning of her journey, but recognition had marked the next stage one, defined by respect, mastery, and readiness for the challenges still to come. The turning point was complete, and the horizon stretched endlessly ahead. The base was quiet now, bathed in the soft glow of the evening sun, a sharp contrast to the chaos that had dominated the skies hours earlier. She walked slowly across the tarmac, her flight suit warm from exertion, her mind still replaying every moment of the mission. The roar of engines, the streak of missiles, the precision of evasive maneuvers, it all lingered in her consciousness like an echo of triumph. For weeks, Row 9 had been a place of dismissal, a station of invisibility. Tonight, however, it was merely the starting point she had transcended. Pilots, crew members, and instructors gathered around her, their expressions a mixture of awe, respect, and renewed curiosity. Some had once ignored her presence, some had doubted her ability, and others had whispered questions about her readiness. All of that changed in the heat of action. Each word of admiration she received was earned, not requested. One of the senior officers stepped forward, the same one who had doubted her so openly. "Today," he said, voice steady but heavy with acknowledgement, "you didn't just fly, you led. You made decisions others wouldn't have dared, and you executed them flawlessly. Your skill and courage have set a new standard for all of us." She nodded quietly, the weight of validation settling in. Recognition had never been her goal, but it was undeniable that she had earned it through every split-second choice and calculated maneuver in the air. The rescued pilot approached, shaking her hand firmly. "I've flown with the best of them," he said, "but today you proved you belong at the top. I owe you my life." Gratitude and respect radiated from him in a way words could barely capture. This mission had become more than just survival. It had become a demonstration of mastery, courage, and unshakable resolve. As the crowd of onlookers dispersed, She walked toward the F-22 she had piloted through danger and back. The aircraft gleamed in the evening light, a silent witness to the extraordinary feats it had helped her accomplish. She ran a hand over the fuselage, feeling a strange mix of connection and pride. The mission had demanded everything from her: skill, instinct, courage, and calm under pressure. Each maneuver had been executed with precision, each calculation performed with relentless attention. The F-22 had been her instrument, her extension, and together they had rewritten expectations. Later that evening, the base held a formal briefing and commendation ceremony. She stood in front of officers, instructors, and fellow pilots, a mixture of nerves and satisfaction washing over her. Speeches were made, awards distributed, and the details of the mission were recounted with reverence. Every question posed by the senior officers was answered with clarity, detailing her strategy, her split-second calculations, and the sequence of maneuvers that had saved the pilot and disrupted enemy formations. The recognition was thorough, undeniable, and well-earned. Row 9's dismissal is now a distant memory, a footnote in the story of her triumph. The ceremony concluded, but her journey was far from over. Conversations shifted to her future assignments, opportunities for advanced missions, and specialized training that would capitalize on her skills. For the first time, she was seen not as a trainee or support staff, but as a fully realized operative capable of extraordinary feats. The mission had been a crucible, a moment where preparation, instinct, and courage collided, forging her into someone no one could overlook. Row 9 had attempted to contain her potential, but the sky, and now her peers and superiors, had declared otherwise. Walking alone to the observation deck overlooking the runway, she reflected on how far she had come. Row 9, once a symbol of limitation, had been the starting line of a journey defined by determination and resilience. She had turned rejection into fuel, doubt into motivation, and invisibility into undeniable presence. The sky had tested her, the mission had demanded excellence, and she had delivered. The wind across the tarmac carried the faint smell of jet fuel and ozone, a reminder of the chaos, the risk, and the triumph that had defined the day. As night fell, stars emerged above, vast and infinite. She gazed upward, feeling a quiet connection to the air she had conquered and the challenges she had faced. The missions ahead were unknown, but the foundation of skill, instinct, and courage she had built was unshakable. Row 9 had tried to limit her, but she had surpassed every expectation. Recognition, respect, and trust had been earned through action, and the memory of today's triumph would remain a benchmark for the rest of her career. The sky was no longer a place of doubt, it was a place of mastery, possibility, and legacy. The next morning, reports of her mission circulated throughout the command structure. Stories of her precision maneuvers, split-second decisions, and unwavering courage became part of the official record. Senior commanders recommended her for advanced assignments and leadership roles, citing her performance as exemplary. Colleagues who had once doubted her approached with renewed respect, seeking guidance, mentorship, and collaboration. The invisible pilot from Row 9 was now a figure of admiration and inspiration, someone who had shown that preparation, courage, and skill could overcome the limitations imposed by others. Even as recognition settled in, she remained grounded, aware that every success came with responsibility. She reflected on the lessons of Row 9, not as limitations, but as motivation. The mission had tested her in every conceivable way, physically, mentally, and emotionally. She had faced danger, uncertainty, and skepticism, and emerged triumphant. The accolades, awards, and recognition were meaningful, but they were secondary to the understanding that she had proven her capability when it mattered most. Row 9 had been the crucible. The sky had been her proving ground. Her story became an inspiration within the base and beyond. New trainees studied her maneuvers, her decision-making, and her calm under pressure. Instructors used her mission as a case study in strategy, anticipation, and resilience. Row 9's shadow had faded entirely, replaced by a legacy of preparation, excellence, and courage. She had transformed doubt into undeniable proof of talent, invisibility into irreplaceable presence, and rejection into triumph. The sky had witnessed her rise, and now the world recognized it as well. As she prepared for the next mission, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. Row 9, once a symbol of rejection, had forged her determination, honed her skill, and sharpened her instincts. The accolades, recognition, and respect she now enjoyed were well earned, but her focus remained on the challenges ahead. Every maneuver, every decision, and every risk would be met with the same precision, courage, and determination that had defined her ascent. The sky had always been her proving ground, and she had emerged victorious. She looked once more at the stars above, feeling a quiet satisfaction. The journey from Row 9 to triumph had been arduous, but it had defined her as a pilot, a strategist, and a leader. She had answered the call of the sky, executed the impossible, and earned recognition that was lasting and well-deserved. Row 9 would always be a part of her story, but it was the mission, the mastery, and the courage that would define her legacy. The sky had spoken, and she had answered with skill, precision, and unyielding resolve. And in that moment, she understood that this was only the beginning. Missions awaited, challenges loomed, and opportunities to prove herself again would come. But the triumph of today, the recognition she had earned, and the legacy she had begun would remain her foundation. Row 9 had tried to contain her. The world had doubted her, but she had risen above every obstacle. The sky was hers, the mission was accomplished, and her story was one of determination, mastery, and undeniable courage.